Okay, I think we're here. When I first hit the go live button, it was saying that I wasn't able to do this. So I was a little bit nervous. I was like, oh no, what's going to happen? All right, so let me get everything set up and we will do this. All right, let's go. Okay, excellent. Okay, so I think that you can see this. Hopefully that's the case. All right, excellent. Had to get everything set up there. I was a little worried. I was like, they look a little different today. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on this presentation today. And the one thing that I want you guys to know is that, well, first of all, my name is Nikki Hernandez, and I started this group because I wanted to help impact teachers' lives, parents' lives, students' lives in a better way with a deeper understanding of the generations, how they process information and how they communicate. And I sort of discovered this information, I think it was probably over the summertime. I was thinking about doing a webinar and was talking to my mom about it, and she was explaining to me these concepts with the generations and stuff. And I was like, whoa, this is mind blowing. So I really tried to take it and kind of run with it. And that's the purpose behind it. So I also want to encourage you to invite your colleagues to this. If you feel that they would benefit from that, feel free to share. And then I'm hoping that this presentation will go around or be around 30 to 45 minutes. I think last time we hit it at the 47-minute mark. So hopefully we can stay within that range the entire time. So to begin this presentation, I would like to start with a question for you guys. And that is, how do you think a baby boomer teacher would describe his or her students' attitude, and they're Gen Z? How do you think they would describe their attitude towards school at this moment in time? The key, though, is out of the following 4 words. So I've given you apathetic, overwhelmed, engaged, and enthusiastic. And how do you think a baby boomer teacher would describe his or her students' attitude at this point in time? So feel free, you can type your answers in the chat and I will get those, or you can just feel free to answer in your mind, whatever is more organic and natural for you. And then also for me, when I was thinking about this question, I started to ask people. I said, what do you think? How do you think a baby boomer would describe his or her students' attitude towards schools? And I gave them the 4 words. And some of the teachers and people who I talked with obviously were educators. Some were baby boomers. Some weren't. And then some people were non-educators who I asked this question to. And if you haven't already selected an answer, I will share what the overwhelming answer to this question was. And that was apathetic. So there's no wrong or right answer to these questions. What it is, though, is that these questions really help all of us to see and analyze how other people process information. And when we can see how they're looking at a situation, that is empathy, right? We can connect with that and we can craft our message and communicate in a different way, a more effective way to reach them. That's, in my view, what true empathy, or part of what true empathy really is. So the next question that I have for you, now that we've sort of talked about the baby boomers, is how do you think an Xer teacher, and an Xer teacher is someone who was born between 1965 and 1980, right after the baby boomers. So how do you think an Xer teacher would describe his or her Gen Z students' attitude towards school at this time? Now, one thing that I want you to notice here is that I gave you 4 words, 4 different words. And they are empty, emotional, engaged, and enthusiastic. How do you think an Xer teacher would describe his or her students' attitude towards school at this moment in time? Now, I think that for the first question with the baby boomers, the 2 kind of most, I don't think that anybody really chose engaged or enthusiastic. But with the Xer teachers here, some people kind of went back and forth between empty and emotional. And I wouldn't say it was necessarily overwhelming, But a lot of Gen Xers described their students' attitude towards school, using these 4 words anyway, as empty, which was an interesting concept, which we'll talk about in just a moment throughout this presentation when it comes to effective communication with Gen Z in the virtual environment. So now I'd like to continue on to the next question, especially if we're going to get out of here in 30 to 45 minutes, because this presentation is quite extensive. But the next question is, how do you think a millennial teacher, so the millennials were born between 1981 and 1995, and how do you think a millennial teacher would describe his or her students' attitude about school at this moment in time, using the same 4 words that the Xer had on their questions? Do you think a millennial would describe the students' attitude towards school as empty, emotional, engaged, or enthusiastic? Now, what's interesting about this question is that as a millennial, my first inclination was emotional. I didn't describe my students as empty, but a lot of the Xers described their students as empty. The baby boomers, even though, yes, empty wasn't one of their questions, the baby boomers described the students as apathetic, and that was overwhelming. So you can see how all 3 generations really are processing the information and what's going on 3 totally different levels. And that's important because, and we'll talk about this in the presentation, but that's important because the way that we view things, how we see things, oops, I forgot to change the banner here. There we go, to the millennial. But how we view things and how we see things affects how we communicate. So we can see that this is pretty powerful. Now, another thing that I wanted to point out to you is that these questions are designed to build, the words are designed to build on one another. So for example, in our classrooms, obviously we wouldn't want our students to feel empty. We would want them to sort of level up. The next level would be to be emotional. Then the next level, where we eventually want them to be, is engaged. And then the next level is enthusiastic. That's the pinnacle. That's where we truly want to be. So when we're thinking about how we want to communicate, we can think of it as this ladder. Is they're starting at empty or apathetic, and we want to help them evolve into being more, emotional about it, but in a good way, kind of excited about school, and then have them be engaged and then enthusiastic about the content and the classes and the structure of the school and the structure of the school and classroom environment, essentially. So let's go ahead and dig in to this immense presentation that I don't think that we'll finish all tonight. So how do Gen Zers process information? Well, this is a big topic because Gen Zers are by far the most pragmatic. They're very pragmatic, meaning that if they don't see the immediate benefit in something, they're not going to do it. They're not motivated to do something that's not beneficial to them, because many Gen Zers have stated this, that when it comes to school, they sometimes feel like they're on this hamster wheel, this never-ending hamster wheel, and they're running and they're running and they're running and they're exerting all of this effort, but not really going anywhere. So that's sort of what connects to the idea of pragmatism, because they say, well, if this is not going to help me further my goals, or if this is not going to help me to sort of make progress in a certain area, then essentially it's just busy work. So that's how a lot of them see it, and that contributes to the pragmatism. So what the Zers, one thing for us that we're going to have to understand is that this means that they will have to undergo the process themselves in order to understand how a particular task or activity or assignment is beneficial to them and how it's relevant to their lives. And so for this generation, for Gen Z, a lot of teachers have really struggled with this concept. When a lot of teachers have assigned projects and assignments to their students, they have given them step by step instructions on what to do and how to do it. But for Gen Zers, who are similar anyway, they have similar traits to millennials and Xers, but they have a lot of similar traits and characteristics as the Xer generation. For this generation, step-by-step instructions don't really work. And you can see some overlap there with the Gen Xers, because Gen Xers, they like to figure things out. They like to sort of test things and sort of play around with things. They're the people when you see them in the office and they're learning a new software, they're the ones clicking all the buttons, figuring out what this is and how this works, right? And that's sort of how the Zers want to process the information as well. They don't want the step-by-step instructions. Millennials, my age group, we love step-by-step instructions, right? But with the Zers, they don't. They might even find it kind of insulting to their intelligence. And they probably view it as just another assignment, another homework, or another thing to add to their list that they have to do, these step-by-step instructions. So they're not processing that piece well at all. So what does this mean? So in our classrooms, if we give them an assignment and it's, obviously now a lot of the things that we're asking them to do is going to be technology based. So instead of them giving step-by-step instructions and saying, hey, click here, do this, do that, we can ask them the questions and invite them to have a conversation with us about how this can be done. So one thing that I like to do is I like to assume that they already know how to use the technology. It makes them feel empowered and it makes them feel like the intelligent human beings that they are. So when we are introducing a new piece of technology, if I, for example, were to introduce Facebook Lives and StreamYards to my students, I'd say, okay, guys, I need you to go to StreamYard.com and I want you to do a live video. I'm assuming that they know what to do. And then even though I know that that's not always going to be the case, what this does is it starts the conversation. They're going to start clicking around, just like the Xers, right? They're going to start clicking around and kind of exploring the website. And then what I can do at that point is I can say, has anybody been able to get into the broadcast studio yet? Just in case somebody, hasn't quite figured that out yet, or maybe somebody missed a step. Does anybody know how to do that? And then a student can raise their hand and say, oh, yeah, I did that just a second ago, blah, 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 and give them the instructions on how to do it. So what that does is it empowers them and they process it well, obviously, and they are going to internally start to understand the benefit and the relevance to what we're doing. So that's what I mean by they will have to undergo the process in order to understand how the particular task is beneficial and relevant to them. And the step-by-step instructions don't really work, not for them. Also, another key point to recognize is that Zers are they're pretty private individuals, and we had sort of talked about that on Facebook before. They play their cards a little closer to the chest, and they keep their inner circles small. And so what this means is that because they're particularly private individuals, in the classroom, especially virtually, sharing their thoughts and ideas with others verbally, camera on or camera off, this can be kind of daunting. And some students have even said, and I've got some quotes here by some students, and I'll show you. Whoops. Let me see if I find it. Oh, there it is. Some students have even said, my classmates don't care about the topic. And so I did ask the students when they told me that, they said, my classmates don't care about the topic. Like if I'm presenting or if I'm sharing my idea about this or that, the other classmates don't care about this topic. And so I asked my students and I said, okay, let me ask you a question. In reality, do you think that the students don't care about the topic, or do you think that they don't care about what you have to say about the topic? And then they said, oh, yeah, I think it's probably that they don't care what I have to say about it. Not necessarily that the topic itself is not interesting. And so that was an interesting point that they had made. They think that their classmates don't care what they think. And then another person said, people might make fun of me. They might judge me. Then someone said, it's a waste of time to share my thoughts and ideas because no one's really listening. And then someone said, I just want to do the minimum to pass the class. So obviously, these are extremely concerning comments. And we would definitely not want our students to feel this way in our class, really at any moment in time at all. And so one suggestion that I have, and I like to do this in my class, is that I like to have people come into my classroom other than just me. I like to invite other students. I like to invite teachers, and I like to invite administrators. And obviously nowadays it's going to be a little bit tough inviting community members and things like that. But anyone within the school that I can have come into my classroom at any point in time, I want them to come in. And I let my students know, hey, this person is coming in because they want to hear our discussion on XYZ. They speak Spanish or whatever. And what this does is it elevates them. It makes them feel important, and they are important. And it makes them feel that someone does care about what they have to say and what they think. And this in turn spreads to the other students, and they listen a little bit more attentively, and they share a little bit more thoughtfully. So that's one thing that I try to do in my classroom. But let's go ahead and continue and talk about some other pieces here. So another tip that I also use in my classroom to help the Zers process the information and I try to communicate with them on their level is I like to provide them with opportunities to associate with one another after presentations, after discussions, in a low stakes environment. I'm not grading them. I'm not judging them. Of course, I'm supporting and helping and guiding and all those types of things, but it's not, there's no pressure necessarily to obtain a certain grade or to not make a mistake, right? So I know that a lot of teachers in this Facebook community are not just Spanish teachers like I am. Some people don't even teach language. So this piece about the presentational aspect, feel free to apply that to your classes in whatever form that may take. And it might be a presentation that you have the students do. It might be a discussion. It might be just a calendar talk, a picture talk, all those types of things that we do in our classroom. Anything that has verbal interaction. So think of it that way. So one thing that I like to do is after we have these verbal interactions in whatever form that may take, is I like for the students to just spend a moment, 5 minutes or so, associating with each other. What this does is it helps to build them up, and it also builds a sense of community. They get to learn from each other and talk to each other, and that helps to connect them, which helps to build empathy in the classroom. So some of the questions that I'll have the students answer, I do give them sort of a guide, of not necessarily like a step-by-step instructions, but almost like a blueprint. So it's a little bit different than step-by-step instructions. A blueprint. Here's your blueprint for conversation. Take it and run with it. And so some of the questions that I like to ask my kids are, I don't ask them this necessarily, but I give them this so that they can have some starting points of conversation. Is I'll say, what was your favorite part of the presentation or the discussion or the picture talk or whatever? What piece resonated with you? What do you think the speaker did particularly well? Use of metaphors, if it's a presentation. Did they connect with the audience? Did they use eye contact? Did they use proper voice modulation, proper enunciation and clarity, enthusiasm? Were they very enthusiastic when they gave the presentation? Did they use proper gestures and facial expressions to convey certain emotions and ideas? Did they use credible information? Were they poised, etc.? Right. So if you're not necessarily a language teacher, you can use those types of questions to help your students sort of not necessarily evaluate, but to give feedback to the speaker. And it's not necessarily to the speaker, him or herself, it's to each other. So the way that I do it is I put my kids in groups, 2 to 3 groups, and they're all standing up, and I give them this guide, and I will actually, and we'll talk about this later in the presentation, but I'll actually convey to one of the students, I'll say, Jesse, I want you to start this conversation. And again, you guys can take it wherever you want to go, but I want you to be the leader of this group and start this conversation by asking Ben question number 1. And then you guys can go in whatever direction you want to, but you're the leader of this group. You're going to guide the discussion. So some other questions that they can sort of ask each other while they're having these conversations and associating with one another is, in what ways could you apply the information to your personal life? That's kind of a critical question because they do need that. They need to understand how this connects to their personal life. Otherwise, it just feels sort of abstract and arbitrary. Then I'll have them ask each other, were there any particular points in the presentation or the discussion or whatever that you disagreed with or agreed with, right? I know one teacher, she was talking about the Super Bowl with her students. So was there anything in that conversation that had to do with the Super Bowl that you agreed with or disagreed with? Maybe you like Tom Brady, maybe you don't like Tom Brady or whatever, right? You can go any way with this. And then the last question is, how can you connect the information with things that you already know? Is there application for that? So those are some of the things that I will do to help my Gen Zers interact with each other, because one of the key things that they need in this virtual environment, and there's a million ways to do this, but one of the key ways one thing that they need is interaction, interaction, interaction. You really can't go wrong with that, and you really can't have too much of it. So hopefully that was helpful. So let's go on to the next topic, which is somebody on Facebook made a great point. They made an excellent point. And they said, Gen Zers are risk averse. They don't want to take risks. And so I started thinking about it and I said, okay, well, if we look at this from a generational perspective, how do boomers, millennials, Xers, and Zers process risk taking and having an obstacle in front of them? How do they process it? And so basically I put this, it's a little summary. It says, when boomers see obstacles, they just plow right on through them. When Xers see obstacles, they develop a plan. When millennials see obstacles, they seek counsel. And when Zers see obstacles, they retreat. And this is a big deal because it's going to impact them for a lifetime, for sure. And so one thing I like to do with my Zers is, let me go back to the slide here. When it comes to risk aversion, I started thinking about, okay, well, what can I do to help alleviate that piece and give them some peace of mind when it comes to making mistakes and seeing failure as a learning experience? Obviously, failure is not fun. Failure is frustrating. I feel like I failed at something the other day and I'm so frustrated at myself for it. But the key, and I think that where a lot of people kind of get stuck with failure and risk aversion and all that, is that they think, oh, if I just keep failing, eventually I'll sort of fail my way to success. And that I get that. However, you won't get to success unless you learn from those failures. And you see those failures as an opportunity to improve upon what you did wrong. And if you don't improve upon what you did wrong, then that failure really wasn't beneficial. And it certainly is not going to push you towards your goals. So there's that piece of it. So I was thinking, okay, well, how can I help them with this? So I looked at some maps and I found this one of a mall map. And I thought it was kind of funny because it says you are here. So when you go to a mall, you will typically see like not a kiosk, but a big sign in the middle of it that'll tell you with a big red arrow like this, you're here. And then everything outside of this like one spot where you're standing, you can see its relative position to where you are in this moment. And I said, you know what, that would be a great metaphor for the students so that they could see how failure helps them and how taking risks helps them. So when they look at this metaphor in my class, for example, and again, my class is gonna be different than you guys's because some of you guys don't even teach foreign language, but when they come to my class, I give them an exact location of where they are, and I explain essentially what the proficiency levels of foreign language look like. So this is novice low, novice mid, etc. And this is where you are, and this is where you are, and this is where you are. So I give them an exact location, and I do it visually because they're very visual, obviously. And then I start asking them questions like, okay, so if we want to go from this level to this level, is it reasonable to conclude that there's going to be mistakes made along the way? And they're like, yep, definitely. And I'll say, I agree. And so then if we know that we're going to make mistakes, is it reasonable to conclude that those mistakes are going to help propel us forward so that we can get to this next level if we learn from them and start implementing more feedback and the things that I'm telling you to do and all that? Is it reasonable to conclude that that's going to help propel us forward? Yeah, Absolutely, right? Okay, so then when it comes to risk taking, if we're going to sort of fail and make mistakes, does that mean that we also sort of have to take risks? What's going to happen if we don't take risks? If we don't take any risks at all, and we know we're here at this particular level, if we know that we're here and we don't take any risks, what's going to happen? We're going to stay in the same place. We're not going to move. And then I'll say, okay, once they've gotten to that conclusion, I'll say, how disappointed would you be if you came to this class and you were here and exerted all this effort? You were on that hamster wheel, running. And you, by the end of the year, were still in the exact same spot 180 days later, or this year, 173. 173 days later, you were still right here. How frustrated would you be? And they were like, and I'm like, yes, right? So risk taking is a good thing. And we can take risks. We can take big risks, small risks, medium risks. It doesn't matter what it is, but we do need to take the risk and make the mistake so that we can learn from it. And that's going to move us forward. And they get that. It's a metaphor. It's an analogy that they understand. And you can have it. You can take it if you want. All right. So now let's go on to the next slide here. When it comes to risk aversion, I really like this picture as well, because when we think about Gen Zers, the Zers, we'll talk about this in more in depth in a little bit, but when the Zers are risk averse, and you look at this picture right here and you see sort of an alligator at the bottom and storms and clouds and snow and all this stuff. When you think about that, the Zers, if you look at this person right here, think of this person as only processing what's right in front of him or her. He's not processing this. He's only processing what's right in front of him right here. That's it. Doesn't even see beyond it. And that's typically how the Zers are. They don't see beyond it. So it's our job as the guide to help them to see beyond this first layer to get to the next point, to the next point, to the next point, which is why I like the sort of mall analogy, is that it says you are here and we want to go here, here, and here, and then kind of walk them through that risk aversion questioning process. And that helps to reduce the feeling of overwhelm. But with the Zers, with anybody really, it's not just a Gen Z specific type thing. But when even me, in some cases, when I find myself in a situation and I find myself super overwhelmed, I feel like I get into this cloud of just hate. I can't see anything, right? And sort of my emotions will take over and I just don't see a clear path of where I can go. And that's typically what will happen with Gen Zers, is that they're only focused right here, not here, not here, not up, not down. It's just right here. And so when they're only processing things that are right in front of them, that is going to contribute to the feeling of overwhelm significantly. So I'll give you a story. I'll tell you a story. For example, there was a student in one of my classes. This just happened. And she said, Ms. Hernandez, I feel really overwhelmed with my work. I stayed up until 5 o'clock in the morning writing these papers and doing all these things for my classes and all that. And I listened to her talk and I asked her a question. I said, Hun, what percentage of the time do you feel that you're truly, truly bombarded with an insurmountable amount of schoolwork that you just can't get done in the time allotted? And what percentage of the time do you think that you look at your task and homework and assignments for the week and you see that number, however many assignments that are due on your canvas, and immediately shut down and procrastinate? You wait till the last second, wait till the deadlines start approaching you and they get closer and closer and closer and closer. And then all of a sudden, everything compounds and you're rushing to get everything done by the due date. What percentage of the time does that happen versus the percentage of the time that you're truly bombarded with work? And she said, well, honestly, I think it's mostly B. There's a little bit of A because I'm taking advanced classes and there is a lot of work, a lot of studying and all that. And it should be, right? Because they're advanced classes, they're AP classes. it should be work. You should have to work to earn your grade. Makes sense to me. She said, but I do feel that option B, where I'm waiting to the last second to do it, is typically what happens, not just for me, but for most students. And so I said, okay, well, let me think about that. I put that in the back of my mind. I said, let me think about that. Let me ask the students. Let me see what they have to say with the rest of them. Because she said it applies to her, and she thinks that it applies to pretty much everybody else. But, I just wanted to verify that. So I asked some of my students, and I said, what do you think? And they all said the same thing, all of them. Students from different locations, students from different districts, students that I've actually never met face-to-face, all these different things. I asked everybody that I could, and they pretty much all had the same answer. So then went back to the student, and I said, you remember that conversation that we had? And she said, yeah. And I said, okay, so we talked about how you have some culpability in this feeling of overwhelm as well. And she was like, yep, I get it. And I said, okay, so here's one thing that you're going to have to do to get control of this so that you don't feel overwhelmed. And I said, let me ask you a question first. Do you think that it's logical? Is it logical to do this? Is it logical to feel overwhelmed, to look at your assignments, to feel overwhelmed and then do nothing, and then to have to stay up till 5 o'clock in the morning on one day and knock everything out all at once, and then the next day you're feeling completely exhausted, and to do that again and again and again and again, week after week? Is that logical? Would that be a good thing for us to do? What do you think? And she was like, no, it wouldn't really be logical. And I was like, exactly. So this feeling of overwhelm keeps happening because you're not doing anything about it. That's the reason why it keeps happening. And she's like, oh, okay. So I said, like this picture right here with the mountain. We have to help them see beyond what's right in front of them. So when they are looking at their Canvas or whatever LMS you're using, and they see 25 assignments due in 1 week, right? They're just looking at it like all at once, but it's really not like that. It's really not like that. And you have to help them. I think that we, really as teachers really have to help them see that. And so what I told her specifically is I said, okay, this is what I want you to do. I want you to do a self-audit. And I need you to get or to have a clear picture of what your next 30 days look like, minimum, right? 30 days minimum. And she said, okay. And I said, the reason why 30 days is because 30 days is going to give you clarity about what you have to do today. It's going to give you clarity about what you have to do tomorrow. And it's going to give you clarity about what you have to do the rest of the week. But it's also going to give you clarity as to what you have to do 3 weeks from now. And when you have the bigger picture in your mind of what the next month of your life looks like, and you map that out, right? Because you're great at maps. You got to have the blueprint. When you can map that out and come up with a plan, because remember, the Zers are very much so like the Xers. They're going to succeed when they have a plan. When they've got that plan, they're going to do great. They like that structure. And when you have that plan for the next 30 days, and of course you're going to make adjustments and add things and take things away and cross things off your list and add things here and there because they're going to come up, right? But when you get control of your next 30 days, you can get control not only of your calendar, but of your life. So it's not about making the work easier or giving them less work, although in some cases I do think it would be kind of appropriate for some people to give less work. Anyway, but it's not about making it easier on them. It's about helping them get control of the situation so that they can actually produce high quality work. That was what it was really about for the student. And that way the student now goes from seeing just the alligator, and now they see the top of the mountain. They can see the next 30 days. And so really and truly, it has to go beyond the 30 days, but this is typically where I'll start with my students. So that's just one thing. So now, okay, we've talked about the risk aversion piece, and the risk aversion piece is crucial because when you think about that mountain with the alligator, the risk aversion piece means that the Gen Zers are not able to process fear. They're not able to process failure or success. They're not, because they're risk averse. They can't process it. That doesn't mean that they don't feel fear or feel scared or anything like that. But what that means is that when fear sort of comes into the equation, they can't process it, so they avoid it. Right? Which means that they're essentially avoiding the failure that they need to learn from so that they can experience success. It all builds on one another. Right? So hold on one second. Let me just, yeah. Okay. So because the Zers are accustomed to living moment to moment or day to day, because that's a symptom of being risk averse, right? You're just living in the moment, and you're being super calculating about what you do in this moment because you're very protective of yourself. You don't want to take any risks. You're very fearful. And when something enters into that equation that sort of disrupts your routine, then that means that you have no vision. You have no ability to set future goals for yourself. You don't envision your own future. And so what this does is, when we can't envision our own future and dreams and goals and things like that, then that's going to lead to a lack of fulfillment and a sense of hopelessness. And I always find it interesting how when you talk to a small child, like extremely small, and you say, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they will tell you instantly. They'll say, I want to be a doctor, a veterinarian, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a firefighter, or whatever. They tell you without hesitation. How does this kid know at 3 years old or 4 years old, whatever the age is, how do they know that they want to be this? Now, they might not be that because things happen or they change their mind or whatever it is, but how do they know with such deep clarity that at this moment in time that this is what they want? And then when we go to high school, you would think years later, they're 17, 16, 18 years old, 15 years old, and it's not that they don't know what they want to do, but they have no clarity. No goals, because they're just living moment to moment. That's, for me, that's pretty concerning, right? So when this happens, there are some signs that we want to look for, right? We want to establish some baseline behavior in our classroom. Obviously, we want to be able to look at, okay, what are my students like on a normal day? There's nothing disruptive going on in their lives or anything like that. What are they like on a normal day? And then on a day when things aren't so normal, you can really pick that out. It's going to stand out to you like a sore thumb, because this is different than the way that the students were acting on a normal level. So some signs that we'll see in our classroom are a desire to sleep excessively, for sure. Overuse of technological stimulants. Obviously, we know that. Self-imposed solitude, not wanting to be around their friends, wanting to be alone all the time, wanting to just be in their room, not wanting to come out. Poor grades, self-pity, this sort of aggrandizement of victimhood and victimization, all that. You'll see increased arguing with parents potentially. Well, you might not see that, but that could be a symptom that's happening behind the scenes. Substance abuse, psychosomatic illnesses. Right. I have a friend who's a Zer who was the valedictorian of her class, and she was telling me about how she has this stomach issue now. And the doctors believe that it's because of the sheer amount of stress that she put herself through, right, to get the good grades in school. And so because she suffered from this chronic anxiety and stress, she has this physical ailment now. That's probably, we don't know. I mean, but it could be something that she has to deal with lifelong. So again, this is serious because it has lifelong implications. And then, sadly, sometimes people just can't process it anymore at all, and they take their own life. So this is a real deal. This is something that we want to address in our classrooms and do it in the best of ways. And we really, when you think of Gen Z, the one thing that I think of in particular, is that they're empty. Somebody without any goals, without any vision for the future is pretty empty. Someone who has not a ton of interaction with other people aside from, this buffering device, this phone, aside from that, is pretty empty on the inside. And somebody had commented on something on Facebook and said, well, shouldn't we just leave them that way? Isn't that a natural state? And I was like, no. Of course, it's not a natural state. It's not a natural state to feel anxious and depressed all the time and empty. That's not something that we just want to leave them with and say, here, deal with it, right? So I just wanted to clarify that, because this is a serious thing. So one of the key points that we want to walk away with today is that oftentimes adults will minimize, right, what kids are going through for a variety of reasons. But, the bottom line is that everybody processes things differently. And so all of this is really critical for us to understand, because it's going to ultimately impact everything that we do and how we communicate. So I want to kind of go over some things that we can do in our classrooms in terms of the way that we communicate with them. So the first thing is that with Gen Z, despite them having familiarity with with different learning platforms and sort of being tech savvy in that kind of a way with social media and all of that, Gen Z is a very sensitive generation, and they have very high expectations of their teachers. And so one thing that I do like about their checklist mentality is that one thing I do in my classroom that I try to, when we're talking about building opportunities for interaction, is I like to do these things called call to actions. So in marketing, a call to action is essentially where a person or a business person, whoever is sending you a message, will say, hey, go do something, click this button, click this link, look at my blog, buy this, do that, right? It's a call to action. And so I took that idea and I said, it would be cool in our classrooms, and some teachers already do this as well. And I think it's really amazing that they do, but they take that idea. And so between assignments, not every assignment and not every day, but between assignments, sometimes they will have a call to action. And the call to action would be like, it'll be something fun. It'll be something kind of silly. Sometimes it'll be serious, but it's something that's personal to them. Right. And so one thing that I like to do is I like to have a call to action that is like kind of quirky. It'll say something like, take a picture with mismatched socks, or take a picture of yourself underneath a tree reading a book, or go eat something healthy that you actually like, or share a funny but still appropriate TikTok video, that'll make people laugh, or something like that, those types of things. And so what happens is that the interaction piece outside of the classroom between students, which is what they need, that connection, is going to go way up, because the kids are going to be commenting. They're going to be saying, did you see what this person posted? Did you see what this person posted? Oh yeah, I liked it, I replied, all that kind of stuff. They need that. So that's one thing that I like to kind of throw into the routine. But one thing that we sort of have to remember is that Gen Zers, part of the reason why they feel empty on the inside is because they're not interacting with people enough, and they need to learn communication. No, this is not a natural state, right? But they need to learn communication, and they need to learn how to do a better job communicating verbally. And part of the reason why they don't communicate, let me back up. Part of the reason why, one teacher asked me the other day, they said, do you ever encounter students that have reading problems? I was like, yes, definitely. And it's interesting. The Gen Zers are a very complex generation, because even though some of them they have struggle communicating verbally, their preference, even though they may struggle with it, their preference is to communicate verbally. In a lot of cases, they want that. But part of the reason why they want it is because it's a compensation for not being able to read well. They don't comprehend what they read as well as they should. And so they need that face-to-face verbal affirmation and confirmation about what they're supposed to do with regards to their assignments. So that's why I'm stressing the interaction piece so heavily on this presentation, because it really helps them in so many different ways. It helps them because they're not really reading that well. And it also helps them because it fulfills them, right? So they need a lot of face-to-face communication, especially with regards to their schoolwork. So I'll schedule Zoom meetings with my kids. I don't just, send emails and things like that. And if I can't reach someone, let's say someone isn't, responding, maybe they're not coming to class or whatever the case is, I will do everything within my power to get this kid on a Zoom call, a video chat, anything. Right? I will call and call and call. I will email and email and email until I get somebody face to face with me that I can talk to. They need that. And if I can't, then I have to go to the administrators and just kind of leave it up to their hands. But I've done everything that I could. Gen Zers also like a checklist style work environment and routine. So I've formatted my the way that I try to communicate with them is everything is sort of linear. They're sort of linear thinkers in that way. So they don't have to click here and go here and do this and do that. It's just go down the list. And so that's easier for them to process. And it's a clear system for them to understand. Also, with regards to flexibility, so a lot of teachers talk about how like Gen Zers, they do not turn in their work on time. And they don't understand deadlines and due dates. And this is very true, right? Oh, I was just looking at the comments. Sorry. Somebody said I'm here, but I don't know who it is because on StreamYard, it doesn't it just says Facebook user. It doesn't say the name of the person who said I'm here. So sorry. I don't know who it is. But anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, yes. So when it comes to being flexible about the due dates and stuff like that, what we want to do is we want to set the day that we want the assignment turned in several days ahead of when we actually want the assignment turned in. Because what's going to happen, we already know this, right? We already know that, and I don't know that there's anything that we can do really to necessarily stop it, but we know that there's going to be students who come to us and say that they couldn't turn in the assignment for whatever reason, right? So when we schedule those days ahead of time and we say, oh, that's okay, do you need an extension, an extra day or two? Then we really are coming across, and we are helping them, but we're coming across as being very empathetic and very understanding, which is what they want, right? But we're still getting what we need as a teacher. So that's one piece that we can kind of take from that. That's one thing we could do to communicate with them more effectively. Another thing is sort of a weekly outline so that they can learn how to budget their time, or as teachers, if it is possible, give them the next 30 days, right? Help them to get to that level where they can see the next 30 days of their life. If you can't, that's totally fine. I don't have that capacity just yet. I have all their assignments and stuff like that, but the next 30 days would be kind of tough for me because I'm just not there yet with the online learning. And then timely responses. So another teacher had posted on Facebook a while back about emails and how often should she be responding to emails? Should she be responding to emails like late in the night and things like that? And so here's the thing. So my emails come to my phone, and most of the time the questions that my students have are pretty simple to deal with. I just type them a quick message, almost like a text, and just send it away and everything's fine. But there will be those days where I'm getting a lot of messages, or I'm getting some complex messages that don't just take, oh, hey, Marisol, just saw your comment. But I will get a message that's a little bit more complex to deal with, and I can't necessarily send them a message. So usually what I will do is I'll usually kind of do a couple different things. Either A, I'll email the student and say, hey, I'm ready. I can do a Zoom call real quick with you and just kind of walk you through it, because it's going to be kind of hard to explain over email. It's going to be a lot to type. Do you want to meet up real quick for 5 minutes? And then another thing that I will do is I'll write them back and just say, hey, I'm not able to answer this email right now. I think that we need to have a conversation. So would you mind waiting until after class tomorrow so that we can talk? And then they'll say, yeah, or whatever. And then another piece to email is to sort of have an understanding that there are going to be days. So if you assign them a project to do, and it's a complex project, and it's the night before it's due, you have to mentally know that you're probably going to get a significant amount of emails. That's just the way it is with Gen Z. So what I will do is I will say, okay, on a regular day, I'm not going to answer emails after 6 o'clock. But my students need to know that ahead of time. I need to let them know. You can have an away message or whatever. We used to call it away message. But you can have a vacation message and say, hey, thank you for your email. I appreciate your questions, and I will get back to you as soon as I can within a 24 to 48 hour period. And there you go. So that way the students know when to hear back from you. And you don't have to feel guilty about not necessarily answering the emails. But when it does come to a project and it's the night before it's due, I know mentally that I'm going to have probably a longer night with emails than I'd like to. But I know that going into it. If I assign the project, then I know that this day, not the other days, but this day, I'm probably going to get a significant amount of emails. And that's just the way that it is. So I make myself available on those days, knowing going into it that this is what it's probably going to be. Now, hopefully I've laid the groundwork so that it's not that way. But if it is, I'm mentally prepared to handle that. And I don't have to feel Like I'm sending a bazillion emails night after night after night after night, and students are writing me at 1, 2 a.m. in the morning and all that kind of, no, I don't have to feel that way at all. And I can have my vacation settings there turned on that says, hey, I'll get back to you within 24 hours, 48 hours to answer your question about this project. That's sort of how the email thing works for me. So another thing is where can we start? So some other tips that will help with communication with Gen Z is by asking questions with an end game. Just made a TikTok video about this, so I'm kind of proud of myself. But one thing that we can do is ask questions with an end game. So one thing that I noticed with millennials, my age group, when you ask them, hey, what do you think about this? What's your opinion about that? They love it. I love it. Oh my gosh. It's something I live for. When somebody says, what's your opinion? What are your thoughts? What suggestions do you have? I'm all about it. I'm all over it. And so are most millennials. But with the Zers, anytime I ask them a question, hey, what do you think about this? I never get a sufficient answer. Never, ever, ever, ever. So one thing that we can do as educators is to ask them a different type of question. Ask them a question with an end game. Like, hey, do you think that this assignment is fair? Do you think it's too difficult? That question has an end game. Difficult, fair, fun, too easy. Or do you think it's reasonable to conclude that? Reasonable would be the end game, right? Do you think that this is fair? Is this reasonable to conclude? Those types of things. They all have an end game. So another thing, some other questions that I like to ask them. Hold on, let me just check this real quick. I want to make sure it's nothing. Okay. Oh, nice. Okay, cool. I just had to look at a quick text. So some other questions that I like to ask my students that kind of help them to connect with the material and to see its relevance, because again, they are so pragmatic, is I'll say, okay, aside from having another grade in the grade book, do you think that this assignment has value? And value would be the end game. Could it add value to your life once it's completed and you've received feedback? What do you think? Right? And then I'll say, is XYZ or whatever I'm talking about an accurate statement? Is it accurate to assume that blah, blah, blah? Is this accurate? Is this right? Is this true? All of those questions have an end game. Accurate, right, true. And then I'll say, do you have any concerns that you want me to know about before we begin? You can certainly send me a private message anytime before, during, or after this lesson or assignment, and we can have a conversation. What options do we have if we get stuck? Are all options equally good and beneficial? And this, I mean, you can apply these questions to a variety of scenarios in your classroom, and I'm sure you can think of them. But what I do is I'll have them write out the options and potential solutions to a problem or the potential value that an assignment might have, right? We just discuss it for a few minutes, right? And what that does is it helps to, of course, motivate the student, but it helps them to see that it has a purpose behind it, that is just bigger than a grade. Because again, right now they're just on this hamster wheel running and running and running, and it's not taking them anywhere. So it's so important, it's so critical to have them understand that. So I'll ask them questions like, what benefit do you think you can take out of this assignment? What skill might you learn when you complete this that you didn't have before? And what knowledge might you learn or now have that you didn't have before? And I have them do this as a forethought before they do the assignment. And then they start to value it. So just a little side note is that Gen Z typically only processes, again, the information that's right in front of them, which means that they will not initially see the purpose of the assignment. So fun story, in my class one day, I was telling them a story and we were acting and doing all this fun stuff. And, for me, it's like, oh yeah, this is awesome, right? And then towards the end of the class, I had them write a summary of the story because I needed to see what language they had acquired. And so as the students, I said, hey, can you guys take out a sheet of paper and just grab a pencil and write a quick summary. I'm gonna give you 5 minutes. I just want you to write a quick summary of the story so I can see what you've learned Spanish wise. And as they started to write, they were so compliant. I mean, it was just immediate. I said, take out a sheet of paper, boom, done. No questions asked. No questions asked. I told them what to do. No questions asked. And I thought, ooh, it's a little eerie to me. And so I asked them, I interrupted them and I said, guys, real quick, do you know why I'm having you do this? And a guy real fast, he said, not a clue. And I said, oh my gosh. So that told me right then in that moment that I really, even though I thought the teaching was stellar and everything was really good and all the students seemed interactive and they got it, I was missing one crucial element, and that was the assignment's purpose. How was it benefiting them? How was it moving? We talk about goals, right? Moving forward. How was it moving them forward so that they could get closer to what their goal was, and or just get some clarity about what the goal was to begin with, right? And so that was really interesting. And so I explained it to him, and I broke out all the levels, like of teaching, not of teaching, but of language proficiency: novice low, novice mid, novice high, and all the other things. And I talked to him, and I pulled out that little mall map, and I'm like, you're here. This is where you are, right? So if we want to go here, or we want to go here, over here, over here, over here, then there are certain things that we're going to have to do to get us there, right? And right now, because it was the beginning of the year at this time, I said, I need to know where you are so I can give you some clarity about that so that we can move forward. And we had that conversation. This is not about just checking the box or me just giving you an activity to fill the time or to get a grade or whatever the case is. It's not like that, but they didn't know that. Even though in my head I knew that, they didn't know that. So I really had to explain that to them. And we talk about it, we reference it, all that language proficiency and goals and stuff like that. We acknowledge that all the time. And really and truly the credit goes to, I don't know if you know her, but Bertha Delgadillo. She's one of the Spanish teachers in one of the groups that I follow. Fantastic. And she was talking to me about goal setting and stuff. And so that was part of the reason why I really took that and ran with it, because I said, that's Gen Z. That's what they need. Right. So the next thing is, another thing that we can do is we really have to get clear as educators. I need a lot of work on this myself, but we really need to get clear on establishing the rules of engagement and the expectations in our classrooms. So one of the teachers had commented on the post on Facebook and said, the breakout rooms are really awkward, and the students, like, they don't talk about anything, they don't interact with each other, and all this stuff. The cameras are off and whatnot. And so what I will do in my classroom, I had that same issue. And so what I do now, and this really helped to alleviate a lot of it, to be honest with you, is I'll say things like this. We are going to do a brief review of this topic in breakout rooms. This will last approximately 3 minutes. For group one, I'll put the kids in groups. For group one, Katie, you will start the discussion by asking Ashley the question XYZ. For group two, Brody, you will start the discussion by asking Tori the question blah, blah, blah. After you guys have processed each question, we will return whole group, where I will be requesting your feedback so that I can ensure that you comprehended the information. You'll be able to volunteer your answers using the electronic hand option. And while you're in breakout rooms, though, I do ask that you keep the video on. Laid out the expectations, told them exactly what they were going to do to start the question, gave them the blueprint to success, right? And I told them how long it was going to last, who was going to start the conversations, why I needed this. I'm going to be requesting your feedback. This is how I want you to volunteer. The electronic hand option when we come back, everything was laid out. They knew exactly what to do and had complete clarity. And because of that, they were successful. Now, another side note that I want to say about Gen Z is, because Gen Z is like checklist oriented, they love to check the box because that's just what they're used to. It just brings them sort of a sense of comfort that they do this. One thing that I want to say is that in the breakout rooms, my recommendation would be to not frame the assignment as a discussion, but to frame the assignment as a task to be completed, if that makes sense. So give them a task to be completed rather than a topic to be discussed. That's going to alleviate a lot of the awkwardness in the breakout rooms, I think. And when you give them a task to do, like, tell me if these sentences are true or false, or read this passage and then answer these questions, or whatever the case is. When it's a task to be done, they're typically pretty successful with that. But any kind of discussion, it's going to be a little bit challenging. And it's not that you can't get there. You can. We've gotten there. It's just that it's a process, and you have to lay out the expectations of that. And once the students get a feel for what it's like to start the conversation and all that kind of stuff, then, and they practice it and they interact, then the breakout rooms become less of a hazard, if that makes sense. I actually like the breakout rooms a lot. So again, I just wanted to put that note on there. Frame it as a task to be discussed, and you can get to the discussions later down the line. And so a next thing is, I just wanted you to kind of think about this as a reflection question, is that the Zers are like Xers in the sense that they thrive when they have a plan or a routine. So in what ways can you refine or clarify your routine for students, whether teaching in person, synchronously or asynchronously? What can you do to clarify or refine that routine? I had to think of a lot of ways myself. And so it's growth, right? It's all about growth. And we do fail. But again, going back to that idea of failure, it's not that failure for failure's sake leads us to success. It's that failure learned from and applied, when that knowledge is applied, leads to success. That's really the key. And it's for me as an educator, just as much as it is for the students, because I did an activity and I was like, either this is going to be amazing or it's going to suck. And so we did it. And like, there was a moment where the activity was really cool and it was really amazing. But then after that, it kind of just flopped. And you know what? I was like, whatever, it's cool. I tried it. I did something new. I learned from it. I know what to sort of do next time, and I'm going to move forward. That's what it's all about, just as much, again, for us as it is for the students. So another thing that we can do is, and I'm sure that we all really, really do this. This is something that teachers, for whatever reason, particularly excel at. But by noticing them and building rapport, and I've got to get better at this, especially in the virtual environment. But, you can say things like, Gerald, thank you for being here today. Camera on or camera off. I've been noticing your great answers in the chat lately and wanted to let you know how much I appreciate your contributions to the discussion. Find something to build a rapport with them about, and that will make them feel connected. One other thing that I do in my class to sort of get them communicating with each other more in the chat is we do shout outs. So if we're having a discussion and the topic is, what's your definition of success? And the students start typing in, blah, 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 all this stuff, then I'll let the students type in all their answers. And then at the end, when everybody's done, I'll say, okay, kids, I want you to do a shout out and type the name of the person who you think had a really cool or great answer, and type their name with an exclamation mark beside it. Give them a shout out. And the students really like that. They feel very affirmed by their classroom community and by their, I feel affirmed sometimes. They're like, oh, Mr. Hernandez, you said something cool. And I'm like, sweet. And I will also affirm them as well in the chat. And it's just kind of this little thing that we do together. So that's kind of neat. Another thing, so I know that somebody had posted on my comment on Facebook, they said that they had a lot of trouble with emails with the students. And so I just wanted to go over some key points and then show you a resource that you can use. It says, so the first thing is that the students want to get to the point fast when it comes to reading an email. The information should be laid out for us. This is typically for teachers. So get to the point fast in your emails and make sure that the information is laid out in numerical order. Doesn't have to be step-by-step instructions necessarily, but to lay the information, what do they need to do in numerical order, and have it be no more than 5 bullet points, because anything more than that, they're just not going to process it. And then keep the information at the top of the email and highlight, if you can, highlight in yellow or red or whatever color you want to. I would say the red is probably the information that you want highlighted, like to indicate that something is coming up really soon, and the yellow is like for later. But however you want to do that, I could be wrong, but I don't know. That's sort of something that has worked for me, and it hasn't caused any issues. So, but you can highlight it purple, whatever color you want. And then send messages once a week or bi-weekly. They need that. They absolutely need that. And so, yeah, it's true that everybody's sort of receiving a ton of emails right now, but it's really important that the students get that information and that they hear from you consistently, because visibility is key, right? If you're not visible to them, they don't know when to expect an email from you, and you're there some days and you're not the others and all that kind of stuff, then they don't they need that consistency. They're like the Xers in that way. They need that consistency. So if my students know that I send an email every Monday, I'm gonna send an email every Monday, and that's really key. But I also wanted to show you something. Hold on. I'm gonna share the email resource. Whoops. Here it is. Oh, shoot. Hold on. That's not what I wanted. Hold on one sec. I'm sorry. I'm still getting used to StreamYard. Chrome tab. I think it's this one. New member. No. Copy of new member question. Search results. This one. I think it's this one. Yeah. Okay. So this resource I have in TPT, and it's sort of the roadmap to success with emails, and it goes way in depth about what you can do with Gen Zers and emails to get them to write adequately. And I do have a freebie that I'll give you, but you can definitely purchase this if you like. And so like there's some key things in here. Like it says, the focus of the email should also be focused. Educators need to set the expectations and then reinforce them by asking additional questions, such as your question is too broad. So if you get an email from a student that says, I don't know what to do, I don't understand this, right? Then you can respond and say, your question is too broad. I don't understand what you're asking for, or I need additional clarification, right? And so you can respond back. One of the teachers at my school actually does this, and he's an Xer, and you can actually respond back with the email expectations that you've created to enforce this. And that's actually the freebie that I'm going to give you tonight is the email expectation guide, and you can have that for sure. I use it with my students. And you can say, hey, you did not follow these guidelines. And if you don't, then I can't respond to you because you're not giving me the information that I need to help you. And so we all know this, is that when Zers are writing emails to their teachers and they're saying, I don't understand, and they're just being kind of broad strokey about it, what that means is that they want you to do it for them. They want you to do the work for them. We all know that. So this guide really goes into specific questions, and it's almost like a lesson plan that you can do and key points to share with your students to help get this, to help teach them this important skill, because email is becoming such, it's almost taken over. It's such an instrumental part of our life now. And so you can use these things like this one, for example. This is such a great point that you can share with your Zers. Think court of law. Keep in mind that anything you produce in an email, this is referring to the students, keep in mind anything you produce in an email could show up in a court of law. So make sure that you're writing an email that is factual and respectful, and that you would not be embarrassed to see if it was produced in a court of law, right? And it's just got so many different phrasing and things that you can do with your students in this. I would highly recommend it. Scroll down a little bit more so you can see some questions for discussion, like have you ever sent a text or an email to someone out of frustration? Do emails and text have tone? How so? So you can kind of discuss this with your students, right? Another teacher note here, it says, if you're not able to complete a task, let the student know, right? Let the student know. This is to the teachers. They will appreciate the follow-up. Xers love follow-up. Zers love follow-up. So when I get an email from a student, I'll say, hey, like most of the emails that I get from students are about like a grade update or something like that. They'll say, hey, can you update this grade? And I'll say, I can't get to it right now, but I will do it at school tomorrow, and I will follow up with you once it's complete or once I've done it. Then the students are like, oh, okay, thank you so much. And they really show a tremendous amount of respect to you after that point. Like when you say, hey, I'm going to follow up with you, and you do follow up with them, I'm telling you, man, that earns you serious respect points in the mind of a Zer, because as we talked about, they have such high expectations for their teachers, if that makes sense. So I'll put that in the group if you're interested in that. And I will also share the freebie also in the group that you can just literally click and it'll take you to the free resource, which is the email guide. The expectations that you have that you can actually use with your students. And I have a Spanish version and an English version, so you can use that as well. Let me just look at my notes real quick, and see if there's anything else because I don't want to miss anything. I think we're good. I think we're good for tonight. And this presentation went a heck of a lot longer than I thought it was going to. I'm sorry, but I knew it was going to be extensive because it was so much information in this, and I'm like, ah. So anyway, I think this actually could be a topic that we could revisit again later down the line. So if you're interested in that, just let me know. But if you have any questions about the generations, just comment in the group, post a question in the group, whatever you want to do, and we can either answer it, type it up, as a quick question. I can email you directly, or we can do a Facebook Live like this with regards to the topic that you want discussed, like communicating with parents, emailing with students. Yes, you're very welcome, Marisol. And I hope this was helpful. So whatever you need, that's what we're here for. So we're all here to benefit from each other. And this is such a, yeah, you're very welcome. This is such a broad topic, this generational concept and the communication piece. Like, I was talking to my mom the other day, and like there's nothing that this generational piece doesn't touch. Nothing. So if you have any questions at all, let's get into it. And if you have any insight that you want to share, feel free, because we can only learn and we can only grow. So I hope you guys have a great night, and I'll talk to you soon. I'll see you hopefully next Sunday. Bye.